Look inside almost any county jail, and you will find a population disproportionately made up of people experiencing serious mental illness, or SMI. SMI refers to conditions like schizophrenia, severe bipolar disorder, or major depression that significantly impair daily functioning. When these individuals finish their sentences, they hit a wall of compounded barriers. They face severe social stigma, a total lack of immediate housing, and immediately severed health benefits. Despite these hurdles, the standard protocol across the country is what we call the cold release. An individual is handed a discharge packet, escorted to the front door, and pushed back out into the world with zero transition support. For someone managing a severe psychiatric condition, this approach actively guarantees a crisis. Without immediate access to prescriptions, they experience a rapid lapse in medication, which directly triggers behavior that leads straight back to an arrest. Treating the release of someone with a serious mental illness as a simple administrative discharge creates a revolving door. It floods emergency response networks and ensures the justice system continuously punishes the exact same people. To break this cycle, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, developed the sequential intercept model. We are going to focus on Intercept 4, a heavily front-loaded, evidence-based alternative to the cold release. This flowchart maps the SMI reentry timeline. Intercept 4 diverges by shifting focus upstream. Transition planning starts months before the individual leaves the facility. The engine driving this is peer navigators. These specialized workers physically connect the jail to community resources, acting as a bridge. Implementing this model requires a harsh trade-off. If a municipality wants to see massive downstream reductions in recidivism, they have to voluntarily take on significant upstream administrative friction to make it happen. System administrators are left with a binary choice. They can accept the easy, guaranteed failure of the cold release, or they can choose the difficult, high-friction success of Intercept 4. Let's weigh that friction, starting with our first evaluation vector, the timing of the intervention. Intercept 4 requires a protocol called InReach. This means community service providers must physically enter the jail to initiate complex transition planning while the client is still in custody. Because the planning happens on the inside, services are molded around the person's exact needs before they walk out the door. This prevents the disastrous service gaps that usually happen on day one of release. But this asks a lot of jail wardens. Granting outside providers regular access to inmates requires heavy logistical coordination and major exceptions to standard security protocols. The second critical vector pushes the friction onto state agencies, healthcare and benefit continuity. This matrix compares the infrastructure of both approaches. Under Intercept 4, states suspend Medicaid during incarceration rather than terminating coverage. By processing paperwork proactively, health insurance is active the exact moment of release, allowing immediate access to essential psychiatric medications. Under the cold release, individuals face a weeks-long waiting period to re-enroll in state benefits. For someone requiring daily antipsychotics, a 3-week lapse is a medical emergency. The trade-off here is entirely administrative. This model lifts the heavy burden of healthcare coordination off the shoulders of an overwhelmed, newly released inmate and forces state agencies to do the heavy lifting. Front-loading the timing of interventions and healthcare logistics takes work, but it is the only proven method to prevent the immediate medical crises that lead individuals straight back into a cell. Beyond timing and healthcare, administrators must evaluate the human element. Our third vector is personnel and the warm handoff. Intercept 4 relies heavily on peer navigators, trained professionals who possess specific lived experience with both severe mental illness and previous incarceration. Deploying peers yields a specific clinical outcome. Their shared identity combats systemic stigma, and they leverage their own authenticity to increase voluntary engagement from the clients. This personnel choice drives the warm handoff. Instead of letting someone walk to the bus stop alone, peers provide direct transportation and a physical connection to service clinics the minute the client steps outside the gates. Placing peers inside the jail carries a severe security trade-off. Facilities have to abandon long-standing policies that explicitly prohibit individuals with a criminal record from interacting with current inmates. Agencies also have to fund dedicated workplace support for these navigators. Asking peers to guide others through the reentry process means they are constantly navigating their own secondary trauma, and they require professional backing to do the job safely. This brings us to the final comparison vector that determines programmatic success: program architecture. Formative research on these interventions shows that peer support services must be structured as strictly voluntary. They cannot be mandated by the court. By structuring the program voluntarily, the system acknowledges that recovery is a self-directed endeavor. Giving the individual a choice in their treatment builds long-term trust and intrinsic motivation. The trade-off for the court system is control. This structure prevents judges from using the program as a legal compliance tool, which means initial enrollment numbers will likely be lower. You cannot force true clinical engagement with a court order. Relying on the shared identity between a peer and a client yields significantly higher quality outcomes than mandated legal compliance ever could. The evidence points to a clear synthesis. The SAMHSA Intercept 4 model, powered by dedicated peer navigation, is the definitive strategy for reducing recidivism among people with serious mental illness. Policymakers need to understand that despite its proven efficacy, this is not a plug-and-play solution that can just be bolted onto your existing infrastructure. We can use this 4-point system readiness checklist to evaluate if a municipality is operationally prepared to implement this model. The ideal candidate is a municipality where program directors possess the political capital to dismantle operational silos across very different branches of government. Success requires aligning local jail administrators to change their default security posture and allow peer inreach. It simultaneously requires state health agencies to overhaul their databases to actively manage benefit suspension instead of defaulting to termination. This program fails immediately when it is co-opted by agencies searching for a cheap, purely punitive legal compliance tool. If a facility insists on making peer navigation a mandatory condition of release, the core mechanism of the program, peer trust, will fracture. Furthermore, failing to provide supportive, trauma-informed supervision for the peer navigators themselves will collapse the program from the inside. Intercept 4 demands high systemic effort and constant administrative friction. But the return on investment, permanently breaking the cycle of incarceration for people with serious mental illness, is unequivocally worth the cost.